briefly give an overview. I don't know, I don't want to take too much of your time with this, but a lot has happened in the last 3 years, certainly as it relates to mechanical thrombectomy and stroke. I presented to this audience before a couple years ago. Just as a reminder, the brain is a very bloodthirsty organ. It takes 25% of the oxygen, but is only 3% of the body weight. It has no way to store energy, so it's very sensitive to blood flow changes. It's the leading cause of long-term disability in the United States, and currently the 5th leading cause of death, 4th if you're over 40. Nader drew a diagram that is really a rendition of cardiac events. Plaque rupture and stenting of this works, but in our case, in stroke, the events are varied. You can have events in the large vessel at the base of the brain, which includes artery-to-artery embolization from the carotid, plaque rupture, as the Nader diagram showed, and most commonly cardiac sources that get lodged in these large arteries at the base of the brain. That's the group of patients that are most severely affected by the stroke, most likely to die from the stroke, and the ones where this treatment works. There's a whole other group of patients that have lacunar strokes from hypertension, diabetes, and other small vessel disease processes that are not amenable to this treatment, unfortunately. And that's what makes this decision-making hard, because we have this treatment that is highly effective, but only for that subgroup of patients. So that's the group of patients we most want to see at the med center so that we can provide this treatment, this mechanical thrombectomy. So time is brain. Again, it's the most sensitive organ to blood flow. First minute, 2 million neurons are gone. In 1 hour, 120 million neurons are gone, and 447 miles of myelinated fiber. And the brain is an electrical system. It's about connections, and when you lose the myelinated fiber, causes the disability, and sometimes is not reversible. And so that first hour is a very sensitive one. There's some lab experiments from back in the 80s that show nicely when you do tie off an artery in the brain, you develop paralysis very quickly. So the firing, the signals are stopped, but the brain cells have not died yet. And as time goes on, more and more of the brain cells die. And that depends on how much blood flow and how much perfusion there is to that region. And so we obviously want to catch as many patients as possible on the left side of this curve, because if we reestablish blood flow, we reverse the stroke. If we get to this part of the curve, then revascularization is no longer effective. When you look at the anatomy of a human, it's complicated. So large vessel occlusion is here. This area of the brain, the blood flow drops dramatically. That's the core. That's the area that dies very quickly. But there's cortical supply to the remaining brain. This is penumbra. The blood flow is reduced. Paralysis occurs. Cells aren't dead yet. If we can reopen it, then we can restore blood flow and restore the function of that area of the brain. And so the key again remains to be time and an assessment of that collateral flow. Unfortunately, some of the patients, when there's an occlusion, have very little collateral flow, and a large part of the brain dies very quickly. In this case, you can see good collateral flow to this region, and so this patient remains a candidate. And for each individual, the curve is different. And if you have a history, if your blood glucose is high or low, if you've had previous events, you're going to be more susceptible or less susceptible to stroke. So for each individual, it's a different curve. So the idea that the time windows are static is no longer as relevant anymore. I had 2 short cases. I don't know if you guys mind me presenting this, but this is what it's all about. It's a 67-year-old gentleman with right-sided weakness and aphasia at 8 a.m. The anti-stroke scale is 17. That's the physician stroke scale, which is a very detailed exam. There are easier scales to learn. Patient arrives at our hospital at 10:17, given TPA at 10:46. This is the exam prior to the procedure in the angio suite. I don't know if the volume's going to work. No. Well, he gave consent. But, this is the imaging. This is the imaging done in the emergency room with the CAT scan. The CT angiogram is acquired. This shows the large vessel occlusion. On the same CTA, you can see the collateral flow on the brain. Here is a perfusion scan that looks at the blood flow going in and the blood flow coming out, the contrast coming in and the contrast coming out, and it makes deductions. And this lower image here shows a higher transit time, so the contrast comes in and out slowly, and that means the blood flow is slowed. It's about half the other side. But the blood volume is preserved. When the blood volume is preserved, then cellular integrity is preserved. When the blood volume drops, that's when the stroke has occurred. Reversing the vessel occlusion at this point no longer is of benefit. And so that's where the time sensitivity is so important. And so we get this email to us, the CAT scan is performed in the ER with the CT perfusion. Software is automated, determines the numbers, and sends it by email and text message to all of the stroke team participants. This is a good candidate because the left side doesn't show core, the right side shows a big area at risk where the electrical activity has been stopped. This is the angiogram that shows the large vessel occlusion, and so we'll go up with a stent retriever, which has been shown in numerous randomized studies to be effective. The stent retriever is basically a small stent that's like a slinky. It expands on its own. Inside the clot, we wait a few minutes to let it interdigitate with the clot, and then we aspirate the clot and the stent deployed together so that it hopefully comes out like that, where the clot is maintained in its integrity and the vessel is revascularized. This was the game changer. 2012, the FDA approved it. In 2015, 5 randomized trials were published in the same year showing effectiveness for this treatment at a very high level. So I'll skip the video. This is the MRI afterwards, which shows a much smaller stroke than what would have been expected, which is this area of territory at risk. So a lot of these patients have small strokes, but they are dramatically improved. This gentleman had mild disability, slight facial weakness. This is the 2015 New England Journal of Medicine articles. I won't go through all of them, but bottom line is we use this coma scale to determine disability. The modified Rankin scale, if it's a 0 to 2, it's the slight disability or better. Again, this is for the worst actors in stroke. And when you look at the trials, we were part of SWIFT Prime, which was the US randomized trial. 60% of the patients who received the solitaire device got better, 60%. 35% if you just got IV-TPA without that device. So it's a huge benefit. In Canada, they didn't use perfusion. They used just the CTA and collateral, and they had good results, but a slightly decreased compared to the American one. Australia had even better ones using the perfusion imaging. And so now that is up to 2015. 2017, we had 2 additional randomized trials that looked at wake-up stroke patients. So what I've described to you up till now is the 0 to 6 hour window, IV-TPA candidates and those just after the IV-TPA candidate. And it's a clear benefit to that group of patients to get this treatment done as soon as possible. In the wake-up stroke studies, there was one from 6 to 12 hours, another from 12 to 24 hours, and in both groups they showed a benefit of this treatment. They used the perfusion imaging to determine candidacy, and if the perfusion imaging was favorable, then we did the procedure, the mechanical thrombectomy. These patients can't have TPA because of the length of time. Again, it's another case vignette. There are videos. I'll just run through it real quick since the volume's not working. But this is the perfusion map. Here we do see a little bit of core, but the core is far smaller than the territory at risk. This is the territory at risk, and so it's a good candidate for mechanical thrombectomy. This is the 2D angiogram, and this is after the solitaire is used, reopening the artery, and the day after the procedure. And a small stroke in the same distribution as the core that I showed you on the perfusion imaging. So again, very effective. We've learned from our cardiologists on the right, yeah, you're right. We have now, though it's by hand, I'm sure the cardiologists have a much more advanced LifeNet variety where everything is time-stamped, but we write down every time to try and improve these numbers. We have room to improve within the hospital and certainly within the procedural space, but there are many bottlenecks to this procedure, and what I know in today is that we're missing a lot of cases in our region when we could be doing more. And that these patients, once they're outside the window or their perfusion becomes unfavorable, they become the most dependent patients in the hospital, very sick, and for that patient and their family, it's a lifelong disability of rehabilitation and attempts to get better. The Dawn trial, 206 patients that were randomized, that's the one that I just described. Again, perfusion had to be favorable, and that's an important detail. You know, as we go further out, less and less patients will be favorable. If 100 patients came in at 30 minutes, 85 or 90 of them are favorable and good candidates for revascularization. At 7, 8, 9 hours, you're getting to 10% or 20% candidates. We still want to get those candidates because we can make a big difference for them, but now our chances to improve the patient has dropped because we've waited too long to get these patients to the right place. It's a very powerful treatment in that 1 in less than 3 patients were benefited. Again, the positive outcome, this is that same modified Rankin score, was almost 50% in the treatment arm versus 13% in the non-treatment arm. So because these patients weren't IV-TPA candidates, if they weren't a candidate for this therapy, they had a very poor chance of getting getting out without disability. Now you saw the LifeNet presentation. I'm not here to compete with that. That's not my objective. But what I do know is that this is a very complicated field. If you're less than 6 hours, we have a good therapy that's well proven to work. If you're past 6 hours, we need perfusion imaging to figure out if you're a good candidate, and we have a good treatment that works. And so we need a better tool for communication than what we currently do. I've explored this Join software, and I've gotten good feedback from a lot of the hospitals that I've gone to present this talk to. And I've also, it's a low-cost initiative. I can get an enterprise license for $6,000 a year at Albany Med. There's a user license at the outside facility that's $10 a month. And basically it provides notification, a text chatting system. For me, this is an important aspect. It's an anonymized DICOM viewer, so when the CAT scan is done at the other hospital, I can look at it on my phone. It's anonymized, it's HIPAA compliant, and I can see what the stroke looks like, see what the perfusion or CTA looks like to get a sense of the candidacy for the patient. There's a GPS tracking system, so the ETA becomes easier because I see the ambulance actually arriving. For EMS, the licensing is free, and so it allows for a communication piece with the protocol stamp, and then potentially video chatting is an option as well. For me, I need a system like this because I need to communicate better with the outside hospitals, the outside emergency room, to look at the imaging real time and get a sense of whether the patient's a good candidate for transfer for this mechanical thrombectomy. It also has a very low IT impact and low cost. It's all cloud-based, so it's much like an app with texting, and it's a simple system. I also think for us there's good inter-hospital improvements because the text chat will include the whole stroke team from the ER doctors, nurses, all the way to the angiotech and nurse, so we can actually see them on GPS coming in to do the stroke case at the same time as we are. And so for me, I think there'll be a great advantage within the hospital as well to make sure everybody's on the same page, which will improve our times to getting these patients treated. This is the old system, the beeper, the phone, and the walkie-talkie, I guess. To what I hope to see with the transmission of the imaging, either PACS to PACS, many hospitals do have that, or to this anonymized DICOM viewer, and then using the GPS and the texting features at the bottom to communicate better. The same company that made that software makes a neighboring software, which is a scale to try to determine who has a large vessel occlusion clinically. This is difficult to do. All of the scales that are created have about the same validity. This is one that this company makes for free, and it would send it to the Join software so that everybody could see the responses. The way it works, and it was developed at Emory by a neurologist who's well known in the field, asks simple questions. Patient on anticoagulation or blood thinners. This would affect the ability to give IV TPA. When was the patient last well seen? Does the patient have arm weakness, face weakness, and then does the patient have gaze deviation? And this determines the scale on what the probability is for a large vessel occlusion. And again, if they're on blood thinners, then they're no longer an IV TPA candidate, and that might reroute you to a place where only this mechanical thrombectomy could be performed. So at the end of the assessment, it gives you a chance of a large vessel occlusion probability. It determines the percentage, and then it tells you whether you should go to a primary stroke center or comprehensive stroke center based on that probability. It also knows where you are on the map and where your closest primary and comprehensive stroke centers are to make that determination. Now again, I'm not married to this software. I'm not saying this is the only solution, but this is a version of the future that's being used at Emory in Atlanta, in Chicago, at Rush, and there are actually some of these spoke hospitals that worked with Rush. When the spoke hospital got bought by a competing system, they didn't want to give this up. This was so user-friendly and used so often that the spoke hospital refused to give up the system, which allowed them to go to a different hospital after the other hospital bought it. So to me, that's a big testament to the value of a software that's user-friendly and easy to use. There is a couple other points I just want to make real quick. There's the Stratus registry. So after the FDA, after Swift Prime showed that there was strong evidence for the use of solitaire, they did a registry afterwards. And what was clear in this registry was the median time from EMS scene arrival to puncture was 152 minutes. So the time the EMS arrived at the scene to the time we did the groin puncture. Each hour delay in the interval was in this interval was associated with a 6% decline in your chance to a good outcome. And this speaks very highly to that time matters exquisitely for this condition. And that so once EMS starts that clock, if it takes that additional hour because we're transferring between hospitals, we've lost 6% of that benefit. I showed you 60%, we're down to 54% chance now, or less than that, 48%. It doesn't sound bad, but certainly if you're that patient, that's a 6% you don't want to lose. And so this is the way you can look at it graphically. As time goes on, your chance of good outcome goes down. And we know that we have systems like this large scale, these large vessel occlusion scales that can help us triage to the right place to get this treatment done fast. This is another way to think of it. It's the bottlenecks, and there are lots of them. Some of them are within our hospital about getting the right imaging done quickly. Some of them are about standardizing the angio suite so that we can open the packs as quickly as possible and get the groin puncture going as quickly as possible. But the one that I'm talking to you about is the first contact, the first medical contact to getting to the right hospital. We know that that's a major bottleneck and that we can do better. And I'm just hoping that we make a difference in changing the process that we're currently using. Again, not married to this particular software or this particular scale, but some kind of thought beyond just what we're doing today. And this is described verbally by Goyal, who's a famous, he's the first author on the ESCAPE Canadian randomized trial, and he goes through a numerical process by which I just explained to you. As time goes on, your chance of favorable imaging gets worse, and then getting the right patient to the right hospital is the key. And I think that that's clear. Now, he's using a mathematical model to do this, so knowing the time to the primary stroke center, knowing the time to the comprehensive stroke center, what is the expected door in, door out time to get through the primary stroke center to get to the comprehensive stroke center if that's needed, and then the severity of the stroke, which is that scale that we talked about. And so all of that is considered on making a decision whether that patient should go to the local primary stroke center or a comprehensive stroke center where this treatment could be provided. And I think hopefully this will encourage us to think about this issue systematically, because I just know that as the end user, just last night I did a case at 1 in the morning, so that's part of why I'm racing through this talk. You know, that patient stayed in an outside hospital for hours, unrecognized of the condition, and that was a major delay for him. And so we have to do a better job. And now that was a difficult case, and I didn't show basilar artery occlusions, but there are other kinds of strokes that can be difficult to diagnose. And so it is a difficult field, and that's why I think it requires some better communication pieces in order to resolve these issues. And I think that's what I'm going to close with. This is just a conglomerate of the cases we've done recently. Yes, please.
So a couple questions. From an EMS standpoint, if it's beyond the TPA window, should they all be going to you rather than stopping at our other hospitals?
If they have, so if they're on anticoagulation, if they've had recent surgery, that's another contraindication for TPA. And if, that's why I think that scale could be of value. If they look like they have a large vessel occlusion, then stopping at the primary stroke center to confirm that is wasting that patient's time, is my perspective.
If we get a radio call, should we divert them to you?
Well, so I've been here before, and I've gotten to this point before. I would say yes, but I don't have the authorization to say yes. But as the evidence mounts, it's becoming clear that it is yes.
Okay. And for wake-up strokes, should they be going to you?
They don't have an IVTPA option.
Yeah.
So if they have a high stroke, if they look like a bona fide stroke, which is where that stroke scale would be a benefit, then they need to come to us because that saves that patient time and gives them a better chance of having favorable imaging and that procedure.
And the last question is, since we don't have CTA perfusion studies, we can just do a CTA. Are we wasting time doing the CTA at my hospital rather than sending them to you where you guys can do CTA with perfusion?
Plus minus. So I think I still have a utility for CTA at outside hospitals, particularly for patients who are on the borderline where you're not sure if you're dealing with a large vessel occlusion or not. I know some of the primary stroke centers want to keep their stroke patients who are not going to get interventions, and so I still have utility of them obtaining a CT angio once they've gotten there, and we're trying to make a decision about delivery to the comprehensive stroke center or not. But whether or not, again,
My only caveat to that is if the CTA is done on the first time going to the CAT scanner. So that's taken me years to get at Albany Med, and I get that that's a big issue with the creatinine and all that. But if you're going back to the CAT scanner, once you've come out of the CAT scanner, you've just wasted an hour and you've dropped 6% chance of getting that patient better. So if you're doing it, if the first time you go in to confirm a large vessel occlusion, that's certainly worthwhile. And then you can send those patients who have collaterals and a large vessel occlusion to us. But if you're deciding afterwards whether you think they need a CTA, then that's an additional hour that's lost for that patient.
There's obviously blood pressure requirements for giving TPA. Do you guys have blood pressure suggestions transferring to you guys, or does it matter as much?
Well, I mean, certainly if anybody's received TPA, they need to be less than 185/110 during transport, just as much as anywhere else.
I'm
So
saying like
in
the
those
over
driven
6
ship
hour
patients,
cases that are out of the TPA window, and 200 over 100. Do we want to lower that, or is that something you guys would work with?
We would want to lower it, but that would not stop us from doing the mechanical thrombectomy, because we would use drugs during the procedure to get it down.
Good to go.
yeah.
Alan, I really enjoyed your presentation. You hit upon all the key points that have been plaguing us for many years, and you condensed it in just a few minutes. That was fabulous. I just want to focus on a couple different points. I'm going to put two different hats on. First, I'm going to put on my EMS hat, not my resuscitationist hat. So I'm in the field. I have been searching for years, and maybe you can enlighten me. I have not found a physical exam and historical method yet to really identify LVOs well. There's all sorts of scores and scales, and have you found anything with good sensitivity, good specificity? Because I'm putting myself on a political chopping block, which is more than fine. I don't mind doing it, but obviously the companies that I work for want the patients to go to them unless I have a very good reason to say they should go elsewhere. And I'm more than happy to send them elsewhere, but it's only how good is that tool. So have you found something good that we can do in the field? No imaging, so you got history, you got physical, that's all you got.
So I think that the FAST-ED and RACE, they aren't perfect, and there will never be a perfect scale. Even the anti-stroke scale, which is a 40-point system, still makes mistakes because of the way the brain is connected. You can have an awful looking stroke on the scale from a very precise location in the brain. So a small vessel occlusion. That will always exist.
And conversely, you can have a very low stroke scale score with a large vessel occlusion. So, we've seen that
both
for sure.
are possible. So I can't ever tell you there's going to be a solution clinically to that problem.
How close are we though?
But we're closer, and that's the part that I get
50%,
frustrated, is to not
60,
adopt a
80.
system which is pretty good in general. It seems like we're missing the chances, because if you have gaze deviation, if you have weakness in the arm and face, your chance is pretty high of having a large vessel occlusion. It's not low. There are going to be some that aren't, but it's not a low, because gaze deviation requires parietal function, and the others require anywhere within the motor system function. So it's a pretty simple scale, and it gives you a pretty high probability of having a large vessel occlusion, 70–80%.
I think from a pre-hospital focus, that's where we need to look. 70–80% is a reasonably good number. So, okay, so that was the question.
The one mimicker of hemorrhage too. So if you have a hemorrhage, not able to be figured out on a scale.
Well, the advantage of that, though, if it is a hemorrhage, it still should go to Albany Med anyway, so to me, that's not a loss. That's
Yeah,
where that patient goes anyway.
We have some things.
So
we
it
can
means
do.
you can't use your retrieval, but
Yeah.
you're still in the right place.
Right.
So we've done the right thing, either way. And now, putting on my hospital hat, would there be benefit to perfusion software? We just built a new hospital in Samaritan, and I was pushing to have our scanner get the right software. Lost that fight. Is that something we should push for in the community hospitals? And I agree with you totally. Get all imaging done at once.
Bruce,
Go
I'm
from
sorry,
the
we can't
cot
hear you over
right
here.
over. I'm sorry, what?
You got to speak up.
Speak up, please.
Oh, okay. I've kind of left pre-hospital care now and I'm moving into in-hospital care, and I'm in 100% agreement they need to get all their imaging at once. So move from the EMS cot directly to the CT scanner and get imaged. Is there strength for us to push management to get proper perfusion software, or is it not going to be useful to you as an external institution? Because I'm just thinking ahead, going to, so like, for example, I could even using their presentation before. Let's say I get all the imaging and get the perfusion, I can activate your team from an external hospital if we have the right thing, and I have my little chat with you,
Yeah.
and patients coming to you and you're coming in at the same time.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's, if you're doing it at the initial onset, then perfusion, mapping, especially because those wake-up strokes beyond 6 hours, that's the only tool we have to triage the right place for that patient. In other words, favorable perfusion, they need their procedure done as quickly as possible.
Let me ask you, Alan, just for complete clarity, would your team then want to do its own perfusion once they arrive because time had passed between the initial CT perfusion and the
And
transport?
so that would depend on transfer times, but if it's less than an hour, we would just go at that
Yeah.
point. If it's,
Good.
if
I just
it's
wanted
2 hours away, then the question would be, do we need to repeat it?
to, yeah.
The risk, fortunately for this procedure, has also improved. I've been doing this 15, 16 years in the area. The tools have gotten better. The safety margins are much higher than they've historically been. So we may occasionally do a case that the perfusion mapping is poor, and we just haven't helped that patient because the stroke was going to happen anyway. So that isn't the end of the world, but we were very keen not to do that before, and now we're accepting that as a possibility more and more. So rather than do more and more imaging, which delays the care, we would take a person who had perfusion imaging that was favorable in an outside hospital and just go straight to the angio suite and get it done.
But I think the precise patient that you're describing is the kind of patient I think we'd really like to come directly to the center. If we really think they have a large vessel occlusion, then having them stop at the outside hospital, even if they get all their imaging done, you've got your door in, door out, just like Alan said, that's going to delay the time they can get to the thrombectomy. So the best tools that we have
That's why the scale's important
exactly
still.
to try and identify these patients in the field, if possible, to try and identify those patients who might really benefit from this procedure directly at Albany Med.
You also have your walk-ins as well.
True.
Coming through the
Yeah.
waiting room.
Thank you for pushing for the change. It's a lot of work.
Most walk-ins are probably not large vessel occlusions, though.
There's still some.
Yes, there are.
Yeah, I just want to make a couple comments. First of all, I think the transfer center at Albany Med generally works extremely well. The last time you presented to us, Alan, 2-3 years ago, there was the sense that you really didn't want the outside hospitals doing CTAs. You wanted to be able to try to identify the LVO patient, get them to the medical center as soon as possible. I will just comment that there's some variability depending on who I talk to as the emergency physician with the neurologist on call as to how much of a workup they want done before I transfer the patient. Sometimes it seems not to be consistent. So it's really a case-by-case basis in my practice, but I just make that comment because that, if you guys are not going to accept the patient until I have a CTA done, that delay is not on me. So I just want to make you guys aware of that.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
Completely fair. I will say, for my own practice, if I have a patient that I'm called about from an outside hospital who doesn't, or sounds like less likely to be a large vessel occlusion, I have in those cases often asked for a CT angio to be done at the outside
Understood.
hospital for the purposes of helping to triage
Sure.
appropriately.
I think,
We have an endovascular call person too, that I sometimes take the call directly.
well, the transfer center basically puts me in touch with
Yeah,
who they want to
whoever,
put
yeah.
me in touch with, so I'm not in control of that.
Understood. Understood.
I think that the other thing that actually will go a long way for these patients, Sam and Bruce, I think that the thing that would be extremely helpful is when those pipes open up and, Alan and Colin can take a look at those images. Hopefully that will occur soon. We've all been hearing that it would occur soon for a long time. But hopefully it will, because even if the perfusion is done, somebody else has read it. I know Alan and his team, they're gonna wanna see the images of the angio before they get in there. They're gonna wanna know what that perfusion looks like, regardless of the reading. And we need those pipes to open to be able to share that data between the centers. So hopefully that will occur soon.
Are you guys waiting for creatinine to come back, or are you just putting them?
Sometimes the ER attending does one of the point of care, but there's plenty of data that supports
Yeah.
not doing that. That you can go straight into the angio suite and do the IV contrast. But the risk is exceedingly low of nephrotoxicity. And again, neurons over nephrons. they say. But it's just, it's not, there's still room for improvement, and I just see it every day, and I just know that we can do better in getting the patients to the right place. We do it very well with trauma and other conditions, so.
This was really a great summary of where things are at today. I mean, this would be great to take to all stroke centers, I mean, in the region.
I've kind of done that.
You know, I know, you've been to our place.
Yeah, I'm coming again. You're gonna get sick of seeing me. But there, you know, the other aspect is the 18 gauge needle. Perfusion requires an 18 gauge needle. It's a lot of contrast that has to be given as a bolus. A lot of times that's missed, and so.
I ask for that now, and every time I'm asking for a transfer, I ask the doctors at the outside emergency department to put an 18 gauge in. Certainly EMS can do that too, so it'd be great
And
to
then
have that in
the
place.
other problem with perfusion is the expense, right? So there are ways that, you know, they're willing to sell with in different models that we can explore if that's something that's of interest. If we, you know, so that's a possibility. We've used a system that again emails and texts us very readily, so that's worked well for us. But we can work on because they obviously want to see more users, so there's sometimes ways to leverage that so that both parties are getting the software for reduced costs. So, but again, the key to that is getting it done when they first come in. If they're going back for the imaging, I just think that's a huge waste, and they should probably just come directly, especially if they have a high, you know, NI stroke scale or any other scale that you're using. They look like blood vessel occlusions. And I think in the beginning we talked about wake up, anticoagulation, recent surgery. Then there's less of an impetus to even stop at the primary stroke center too.
You know, I think it's worth mentioning, I thought it was a fantastic presentation, but this brings us back to the same point that we keep revisiting, which is EMS operates with horse blinders on or full-on blinders on, because hospitals have refused to provide us with a list of services that they provide. And until that happens, we don't know who has what except for word of mouth.
I can say on this, we have
Yep.
3 faculty, 24/7 covered.
There is no other hospital in the region that is doing this procedure.
I understand that and I advertise that.
It is absolutely true. There is no other hospital that is doing this.
So from that, one of the things that actually is on the agenda for today actually is the ASA guidelines, how they apply for us regionally, and what our regional procedure should be about for stroke. And, you know, Rob, maybe that's the best thing for us to start the agenda with, and, you know, if Alan and Colin will stick around to that discussion, that's probably really fun. So,
And honestly, Don, this would be something great for the CMAC to
Yeah.
Now, there is a statewide stroke group that's working very hard on some of this stuff. What more than anything else it has held is that this is a region by region discussion and decision, because the resources are so different in each of the regions across the state, including not only the primary stroke centers we already have, the potential centers that will be designated as comprehensive, but then the ability people have to do interfacility transfers of patients with either vasoactive medications hanging. So, broad discussions.
There's a short one.
So, first time up here, and I also have to apologize that since the last meeting, I'm now chair of Ellis, so we'll see how well this goes long term. Sorry. So, since we have our guest, I think we'll skip the old business, new business, and go straight into talking about the new stroke guidelines. Unless we just decide that we were going to hold off until the stroke. So we're just going to start talking about it. What did you just decide while we're sitting down up here? You said there's a stroke
I was
video
just
already going?
deciding how nice it was to have you up there.
Okay, so,
Just one quick thing, you may want to approve the minutes from last time.
yeah.
You gotta do that.
So has everybody read and reviewed the minutes from last time? Can you get a motion to approve? Seconded, Traffic. All in favor?
Thanks.
So anybody have a problem if we go straight to talking about stroke while we have our guests here? So do we wanna go and pick a scale that we're gonna use, or we're just gonna talk about the process that would happen for if we're gonna have people start selecting Old Meadow over the other primary stroke centers? Which, Howard, is every other stroke center is primary and Oldham is the only comprehensive. It's not published, but now you know.
I do know, but, you know, I provide care in 18 counties, so.
Yes, sir.
Well, I think the scale that Alan spoke about, is kind of similar to the Cincinnati stroke scale. And, that scale seemed to be better because you take into consideration previous surgery, recent surgery, et cetera. So I think, I don't see any reason why we shouldn't adopt something like that into a pre-hospital assessment protocol for stroke.
And which scale, because you talked about two scales.
The scale that
Was the
we
race
talked about
and-
that was on the
Fast
smartphone,
ED.
Fast ED.
Fast ED?
I mean, that looked good to me.
Very quick.
Yeah, and easy.
While you guys were talking, I actually reached out to Connie Matera. I don't know if you guys know her or not, but she's a prolific nationwide speaker in EMS. She does a lot of stroke care stuff too. She's a nurse, educator, paramedic administrator, et cetera, from a large system out in Chicago area. I just got back from her the tools that she uses to both in-house and, not to call EMS outhouse, but outhouse.
Outhouse.
Manage and assess, and I just forwarded that to a couple of you guys, Dr. Daly included, and Dr. Rathert. I don't know if you guys necessarily need to pick something today, or you wanna spend some time looking at it.
Probably look at them and make a decision for next meeting. So aside from deciding what scale to use, agree that wake-up strokes should go to comprehensive stroke center. Anything else we really need to do at this level?
All wake-up strokes or wake-up strokes that you identify with LVO? That you suspect LVO?
I think that's a question for Dr. Bullis and Dr. Amory.
Yeah, I think if you're using the scale, then wake-up strokes less than 24 hours is what has been proven in the literature that have a high probability for LVO. I mean, that's the number, I guess, greater than 50%, greater than 30%. You know, that's where the devil's in the detail. That will depend on the scale you choose. But that would be still huge. That would be a huge change for us, and I think it would help a lot of people.
I completely agree.
So you're talking about that subset, that you're
Yeah.
still suspecting LVO, not all wake-up
Not all
strokes?
wake-up strokes.
Are we going to include people who are greater than 4.5 hours as well, or 6 hours?
Well, yeah, because they're not TPA candidates, if there's,
And if they're on Coumadin or new ranges, which we're basically identifying now what we have, so we'd be putting all those into that group.
We could word it and just say without contraindication, and then we can list out those contraindications with the help of Dr. Willis later, once we pick which scale. I guess, we have to do our individual homework, we gotta figure out which is the perfect scale, what are the right contraindications, and then everyone else defaults to going to the medical center.
So we probably should do that for next meeting, I would assume. Do you guys want to do it now, or do you want to do it next meeting?
I haven't done enough homework to do any of it now, but then again, maybe Dr. Willis has, so I'm getting like,
I mean, again, I'm partial to the Fast ED because it can marry to the other software, which allows for a communication piece, and also it's as good as the rest, and maybe better than simple. I'm happy to send you a draft of a proposal. I haven't done an EMS at all triage protocol, so it would be, I think, unusual for me to present what I think has to, but I know that if it's a large vessel occlusion on that scale, the software also would give you a sense of where you are. So if you're very far and you still are a TPA candidate and you're really high on the scale, that's where it gets hard, right? Because then maybe you need to go to the primary stroke center and get IV TPA before going. But outside of that, if you're high on the scale, you probably should go to the comprehensive stroke center.
how would you define very far?
That's the problem. And
More than
that-
60
you know,
minutes?
That's really the question that we most need to address in this room. is how much farther than that primary stroke center do you go?
Didn't this just get?
That's in the stroke
From
that's in
CMAC
the stroke guidelines.
Right, the stroke guidelines does not give a specific time,
Right.
it does not suggest a specific time, just like the AHA here in New York State suggested it should be a regional decision depending upon your characteristics of your hospitals, your primary stroke centers, and distances necessary. I mean, being in New York City is very different than being upstate.
Howard, I think what you're talking about is the state stroke guidelines, which were not quite voted on. They never made it to SEMSCO. SEMSCO didn't exist.
Censko held off on those to incorporate them in the BLS protocols, I believe.
And that was the wake-up stroke versus not the 3 or 4 hour,
That
or is it
included-
2, or is it 4 and a
right,
half?
that includes
or is it
some
4 hours and 15
timing in
minutes?
it too, I just wanna make sure that whatever we do doesn't contradict.
No, that was all about the primary stroke center, getting a patient to a primary stroke center. This, on the other hand, of this of the comprehensive stroke center is a problem literally for this region to make the decision on the capabilities that Dr. Boulos is saying exist for the institution, because there is no state designation for a comprehensive center.
I think the other thing that we have to keep in mind is because this is collaborative protocol and regional based and slow to move because there's a lot of moving parts, I think we also can't make our decision based on where we are right now, but where we think we're gonna be a year and a half, 2 years from now with the advent of new technology that seems to come out every 8 months, right? So I guess part of the question is do you see stuff on the forefront that's gonna be changing that we need to keep in mind as we write protocols that will, that we're gonna have it all be met in 8 months, or that St. Peter's is gonna have in 6 months that, will change how we need to make decisions? Is there anything, Bert, can you think?
I mean, it's a great question. I don't know if something that would dramatically change what we're talking about today. So we don't have the EKG, the objective evidence for large vessel occlusion that can be done in the ambulance. We just don't have it. So unless that gets developed, the scale with those other factors, anticoagulation and time of onset, will determine where the patient is to go. And I think for the foreseeable future, the next year or two.
Because our rollout time and adoption time is slow because there's a lot of members that are, a lot of providers that are loosely connected in some regions. So making a decision that can stick for a while in order for our education to penetrate the full group of providers is important.
And there's been success with this large vessel occlusion scales for the last few years, because some places have adopted it with the first trial evidence. And Rhode Island has had a dramatic improvement in their outcomes with stroke, but they had some statewide legislation that passed to do that.
I think among the goals we need to make sure is that we take care of this at this level, and that it never gets legislated. As long as we address it. We have to make sure that we address things like this aggressively enough to get to a point where our patients are getting optimized outcomes, and it doesn't become a governmental issue, because then something else changes, and it's now legislation, and you can't make it go away.
Do you feel that this is important enough, this should be addressed at a collaborative protocol level?
No. I think at the collaborative protocol level, this needs to remain regional, and this needs to be a regional procedure rather than a collaborative protocol, because for us to start to address what the specific conditions are in Olean or in Plattsburgh would be very difficult for us to do, and that's why all of the state stroke commentary is all devolved to regional things. So I think from a regional perspective, we should look to establishing what the right thing for our patients here are within the course of the next 2 months. So that, to Bruce's point, let's all go home, do our homework, and look at these different stroke scales. One of the most important things I think is going to be, particularly for the EMS educators in the room, look at the stroke scales that are out there and the education that exists. What do you think is going to be best for our providers? I agree, FAST TD is nice, LAMS is fine. RACE, I think, gets too complex. So I lean towards FAST. I think FAST actually is the one that was just adopted in Massachusetts as well. That's what's being used in Rhode Island. That gives us a little, and in Vermont, which gives us more of a base, And the hardest thing for this group to decide is gonna be, what's the time frame? Right, so for those patients from just outside of Troy, how much farther do you go to get to the comprehensive center, or do you stop at the primary center? For those patients in Schenectady, is that time frame from Schenectady to Albany that window? What is the right window of time that we want to bypass a primary center and go directly to the comprehensive center with these patients? And that's a decision for us to reach here and then put into regional procedure.
Maybe it's just me and maybe I'm just showing my age a little bit, but this seems to mirror an awful lot of when STEMIs and even 12 leads became standards of care, and bypassing facilities that had TPA available and a diagnostic cath lab, but not an interventional cath lab for PCI. And I think it would do us well to revisit some of those same paths.
The thing that we did at that point, Howard, and the institutional memory is important, is if somebody wanted to go to a center that did not do primary PCI, we asked the docs at that center to make the decision that they would be bypassed. So Memorial in particular was at the table, and they would get the calls, this patient has a STEMI, should I bring them to Memorial, or should I go to Albany Med or St. Peter's? At the time, Samaritan didn't have their cath lab yet, and the doc at Memorial would make that decision. This may be something where we build out education for those docs at the community hospitals and at the primary stroke centers, so they can then make that decision.
What finally ended up ending that discussion or argument debate was EHA's standing on PCI being the definitive care. So I think if we have that here, I think we have a good stick to follow up.
I think, Howard, the literature clearly is
That's what I'm
supporting
saying.
that now.
We have
So
that already.
I don't think that's an issue.
I get the question from students all the time, and especially in regards to, and I don't have a tie to either, so I can say it, St. Pete's or Albany Med, you know, you're a mile and a half apart. If you're not sure, drive a mile and a half.
I think the challenge again becomes, as Dr. Wallace mentioned, we don't have that tool in the field to say 100% this is an LVO, and that's the challenge.
But we don't have that for a lot of our patients. It's about,
No,
it's
in
about
reference
getting a
to
good
the-
assessment and making a.
Absolutely,
STEMI
in
versus
reference to the
stroke.
STEMI, but
Yeah.
your point is well taken otherwise. I think that's the one challenge.
So next month
Which
we'll try to
also-
put a, go.
Which also gets back to Mike's point, that building in the protocol, that discussion point with the physician to bypass the hospital makes sense, at least initially, to put people at ease about putting the protocol in place, because it will be somewhat politically sensitive.
And I think, you know, Dr. DeMesa, apologizing for not being here, is actually working clinically right now, but he had talked about cases that he'd had where patients sounded like large vessel occlusion strokes. And he specifically requested an EMS see whether or not the patient would be willing to go to a different center, right? And in at least one of those cases, they ended up coming on down and getting a thrombectomy and doing extraordinarily well. And that's exactly the way I think we would be best served.
That relationship that currently exists, specifically in regards to stroke and sharing patients, if you would, between St. Pete's and Albany, is definitely unique and rare. So, just gotta find out a way that'll work for, again, rural.
Okay. So thank you guys very much.
One other thing to think about too is, if there is no data to drive us in terms of a time, we should probably try to be consistent with our other times, for example, matching up the trauma, just one less thing to memorize. But that's unless there's data proving that there should be a
Well,
difference.
the problem is trauma's an hour.
That's what I'm saying,
You know,
do we know the answer?
Maybe that's the answer, but I think we've got to watch volume really carefully, really carefully.
So if we change it, let's have a reason to change.
We also tie it to, from the hospital end, if we have anyone sort of within, close to the window that you'd be going to the primary, have them do the CTA perfusion scan on their initial scans to catch any kind of outliers.
I also don't think that you need to keep BLS and ALS decisions in the same boat on this one. One can be very protocol based, and the other one can be a little bit more of a reliance on a clinical assessment and decision.
Any more discussion on strokes?
If you're gonna revisit this at the next meeting, can they look into see if the Fast ED app could be added to the protocol app? Or would that have to be a collaborative?
But that app is the whole state, so.
You could provide it as appendix as a tool, though.
Can be a link added to it?
What's the cost on this one?
It probably would be easier, because most people aren't going into their protocol app in order to go looking for what to do for a stroke.
Right.
It might be easier for them just to have that app on their phone separately. But I think that sounds like a really good question. I was actually gonna make a motion, if I may, Rob.
Yep.
That we put together a small group to come back to this table at its next meeting with a recommendation for time to bypass, and what stroke scale we should use as a regional procedure.
Point of information. You don't actually need the app to use the assessment.
Yeah.
That, the Fast ED assessment is what I was referring to. I was not necessarily advocating to buy the software, even though it's cheap. I'm just saying the assessment information or process or tool itself is what's important.
True. I think a lot of the information going along with that app would also tie into the other notification systems we're looking at as well.
Potentially there. Good point.
Anybody second that? Yep, go second. Graphic. Graphic. Okay. All approved?
So who's gonna be on the group?
Anybody interested, contact Daly. You're sitting on that side now. You're getting
Like, put me on
delegated.
your list.
Well, my suggestion would actually be that it not involve people that are already actively working at the comprehensive center, but the people making these decisions come from some of the other primary stroke centers.
I guess you get Don, Sam, Bruce, me.
I'm not
Greg. Greg, go on, Greg. Okay. So backtracking. Correspondence, have new controlled substance agent for Hoosick Valley, which is Kyle Miller. Malt Ambulance has a new administrator. Valencia sent in their ketamine letter to the state. And any other comments on correspondence? Don, you want to do?
Yeah, I'll do academic. So, Scott Skinner was approved to join the committee. We may need a motion for this, since there's some shortages of saline, suggested that agencies could substitute LR for saline if they could not obtain saline. I don't think it's a problem with the state, is it?
I don't think it is. I gotta look at the substitution protocol.
We've always talked about meds, but I'm not sure LR is ever on there.
We have to be careful of, some things you can't mix with LR.
It is a problem.
Bicarb, we don't
They
have it
actually
anyway.
carry in the ambulance though.
Bicarb.
Bicarb?
Yeah.
The only thing,
Bicarb and blood.
guess we don't carry blood in the ambulance.
Actually, you can do blood, never mind.
Some
It's
do.
just bicarb.
You don't carry it though, it's just a transport.
Yeah.
So I don't know what you guys want to do with that, that's out there. We're out there, we need to make a motion or not. Medication shortages, Mary mentioned that DOH is, will let people modify their controlled substance plan rapidly if they're having trouble getting certain concentrations of morphine. Scott brought up TXA, just to let you know we're gonna be looking into it over the next couple months. Forrest, who's from Vermont, just happened to send me a link to Vermont. Vermont already has it in their protocols. Apparently Massachusetts does as well. So we're
Maine,
being surrounded
Vermont,
by
Massachusetts.
states who are using it. There was a question by Jay on what do we do with school bus accidents and if the school nursing would not be willing to sign those kids off. So he suggested call the physician's EMS response vehicle, or one physician to go to the scene to sign them off. RSI was also suggested looking into requiring video scopes for anybody that wants to do RSI. The cost analysis, we don't know, but Scott was gonna send out everybody cost of the different scopes, but you looked into things conservatively. Look at that. The other issue was the way the current protocol is written, it essentially states give the induction agent and then immediately give the paralyzing agent. There was some discussion on that and dissension on which way we want to go. Whether you should just do the induction agent, and if you have ideal intubation criteria, go ahead and intubate without that. So that's going to be talked about at the collaborative protocols when we meet again. Just so everybody knows, I just looked at the ARAMS protocol. The ARAMS protocol clearly states to give the induction agent. And if you can do, if you have ideal intubation criteria, do not give the paralyzing agent. If you don't, then go ahead and proceed. So they're slightly different than what we have in our protocols. The last one, which we probably need a letter from this week to go out, is concerned about patients who are DNR, not transported from a nursing home, that expire in transit to the hospital, so the patient is no longer alive and hasn't resuscitated because they are DNR. When they get to the hospital, somebody needs to take over responsibility for the patient. A few times now, apparently, ambulance has been directed to go directly to the morgue without that happening. So, we probably need a letter stating that should not happen. The patient needs to be turned over to either a nurse or to a physician, but somebody.
So it sounds like Ellis, all we met in St. Peter's, that's the policy where, and Bruce just stepped out.
Bruce is right there.
Oh.
What'd I do?
If the EMS is transport patients, do they secure it en route, either DNR or terminate the code en route? When they get to your hospital, do they go to the morgue or do they go to a ER bed, get seen by the doc and pronounced?
Oh, it's a big mess when you pronounce them. Yeah, we ask that people do not pronounce people while they're en route. It's a fight every time, and it gets done in a different way every time.
Anybody that I've taken in at Samaritan or Memorial goes to an ER bed.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's what I've done in my practice, but it's been a problem at other hospitals, so we need to.
Sounds like a letter recommending to all the hospitals to
end up
put them in the
doing
ER
that. That's basically it.
Oh, Don, can we go back a second?
Yeah, sure.
And I knew I had dealt with the formulary issue with normal saline before.
Okay.
It's actually covered under the collaborative protocols that, for shortages, under the formulary, D5W 100 ml bags may be substituted for normal saline 100 bags if a persistent shortage and normal saline is not available. Lactated ringers may be substituted for normal saline if there's a persistent shortage and normal saline is not available.
Okay, so that resolved that.
So it's actually been covered in the protocols, it's not an issue.
Okay. So if anybody has a question of not being able to get to the door, fluids, they can do that. That's it from academic.
Remsco, they're almost to the point of voting on the bylaws, which has been a months-long process. They have a committee working on fielding the hover mats. They're working on kind of how the initial costs are going to be covered. Other than that, there wasn't a heck of a lot else going on at Remsco. Is that right?
Are you looking at me?
You were the closest person I saw that was at Remsco.
What was the question? I'm sorry, I was talking.
No, I just said basically they're finalizing the bylaws and working on the hover mats, and was there any other major topics that came up?
I think that was probably the gist. The hover mat discussion is a larger discussion with a small group within the REMSCO and trying to work with the nurses committee. I think you're part of that discussion as well, and Carol as well. Trying to see if we can't somehow work with the nurses committee and our current agreement with the hospitals to maybe make the hover mat part of the one-for-one exchange, just like all the other equipment and supplies that we do. Trying to obviously decrease injuries to everybody, the nursing staff and the EMS staff. So some agencies are already using the equipment. Many of us have been tasked in the various counties with reaching out to agencies and trying to get some information as to the level of buy-in that they might be willing to have. So that's probably the most significant conversation that came out of that relative to operations anyway.
CMAC, I don't see Gilly here, they have a quorum.
Actually, it would be me. So Semco was the only, CMAC should be me. You can thank him.
I fixed it.
He fixed it.
Next.
So basically, there was no SEMSCO meeting, which means unfortunately what was recommended at CMAC never went to a vote, so nothing went through. But basically, what happened there, Mercy Flight protocols were accepted. The BLS protocols are still being worked on. EMSC had some suggestions as to what they want to see in their education standards. One of the EMT certification age to drop to 17. Did that happen, Mary?
Not yet.
Not yet. So you'll be able to become the EMT at age 17. There was a long discussion on a TAG report, which I won't bring to this committee because it had nothing to do with the area. And that was basically it from CMAC. The next meeting is in May, if anybody wants to attend. And SEMSCO, there wasn't a quorum, so nothing got officially voted on.
So QI, I'd like to thank Tom Williams for taking that over.
We went over our plans for upcoming QI projects. Jen Nichols just came on board with Deb Koffs, and we're working on, again, trying to get into the CARES registry, hoping to learn from past attempts, and with some new approaches that I think we'll hopefully have some good success with. Art brought up some issues with stroke alerts and primarily our regional documentation of how the stroke alerts are being documented, negatively affecting how the reporting looks. So it's artificially low because the data is just not being collected properly. So we talked about possible remedies. Deb went over chart audits for new providers, and she went through protocol exam results. Those exam results are available, I think, if anybody needs them. And then new abbreviation lists. So Deb went through and updated the abbreviation lists so they're more aligned with some of the national organizations, and that hadn't been updated since 2004. Yeah, so thank you, Deb, for doing that.
Tim, Hawk reports.
Hawks met in mid-March. There were a couple of talking points there. The big one was the regional hospital vulnerability analysis. In one way or another, every hospital had the same concerns listed there. Rank of importance differed from hospital to hospital, but you can look at the concerns that they had, and they were all common amongst all the facilities that were present at the meeting. The other thing that might be exciting is improvement in hospital radio communications. A rep from the Albany County PSAP, Steve Roberts, was there and talked about some stuff they're planning on doing now to improve direct communications, including dedicated frequencies and especially improving field communications as well. That was about it from the hospital.
What's happening with the 800 radios for the hospital?
They're working on that as well. With this.
So agency updates, no glucometers or ALS upgrades, bills for responder, Rensselaer, and Rensselaer County Sheriff's Office. EPCRs, Chatham, North Greenbush, and Muskegon Fire Station 1. Chatham, sorry.
I like Chatham.
H is sound.
Not local, I see there was one. Public access, there's a list. Most of them are updates, couple originals. So, new business. I have a presentation by Empire Ambulance. for their RSI.
Good afternoon. My name's Dave Laverne. I'm the training manager with Empire Ambulance, and for the past few months now, we've been working to get our RSI program up and running. I believe we have reached a point where I'd like to get approval if possible. I'll basically start out with everything I'm about to go over with you has been approved with Dr. John Broderick, who is our medical director for both Mountain Lakes and the Remo regions. Primarily to start out, we would require that every paramedic have been online for at least a year, practicing in good standing, have ACLS, PALS, EPC, or PEP cards that kept current at all times. These paramedics would be required to attend our training program, which is going to be set up and run by Glenn Stevens. And each class he runs, I require that the advanced airway course is given. That's a 4-hour portion, followed by the didactic phase of the RSI program, followed by the practical and testing phases of the RSI program. After that, there's going to be a minimum of 8 hours annually required for backup training. So that being said, after the course is completed, Glenn will make his recommendations to myself and Dr. Broderick, and then from that point on, we'll decide whether that medic is going to be a trained medic or a credentialed medic. Moving down, there's always going to be 2 paramedics for every RSI. 2 credentialed or a trained and a credentialed. There must always be a credentialed medic present for the procedure to be performed. If there's only one and they need to call for help, we are going to be working on procedures to talk to like Clifton Park, maybe Colony, other approved agencies, and just use plain language on the radio. Look, we need a credentialed medic, or we can take a credentialed or a trained medic. Just using plain language at this point in time. We haven't set anything up like from Saratoga County like Signal 41 as of yet with any other agencies. So that being said, that is the training portion and calling portion of our program. Our procedures. I have already purchased a bit of equipment for RSI. Video laryngoscopes. There is one in each ambulance at this point in time that will be performing RSI or will have the capability of performing RSI. Vents. We have LTV 1200s. We also have the smaller vents, which will be in each ambulance. Our gum elastic bougies will be in each ambulance, along with King Airways, which is our preferred secondary airway device. The rest of the equipment is used or is on the Part 800 at that point in time. Our pre-oxygenation and vital breaths, that's all spelled out in both the training program and the classes here that are given, advanced airway and the RSI program, which I do have here. If anybody'd like copies, I'd be more than happy to make them. And this is going to include everything from, 3 attempts, 2 by one medic, 1 by another. If intubation is unsuccessful, we'll go on to the secondary airway. if in the rare occasions you've got a patient with severe swelling, whether it be for an allergic reaction or from airway burns, and a crike is needed, we will have the new trachs available. Also, after talking to Dr. Broderick, we will be trained in actual crikes and have the equipment on board the ambulances to handle them. The charts. We will have a large number of charts in the ambulances. They will be for those that, those medications like rocuronium and ketamine, ideal body weight. Other medications we'll have charts for are for actual body weight. That is covered. We'll also have our normal equipment, which is going to be a commercial tube holder. We are also going to place C-collars on each patient that is intubated. There will be continual placement checks. There is requirements for both SpO2 and end-tidal to be used. That is basically the basis for all of this. After the procedure is done, I will receive copies and notification. Dr. Broderick will get notified. Every single RSI will be reviewed and rated. And I believe at that point in time I've kind of hit the general overview. I don't want to go into each little nook and cranny, but that is the gist of what I'm hoping to get accomplished, starting with Remo for Empire Ambulance. Does anybody have any questions?
I do.
Yes, sir.
You're going to use my agency to help you with an RSI, but you've had no conversations with us whatsoever.
I have not approached anybody. I wanted to get approval before I started approaching other agencies, sir.
You mentioned it as a facet of your plan, but it's not actually in place yet, is it?
It is not in place yet, no, sir. No, that is something that is coming. I'm trying to do this systematically, step by step. Before I offered things up and offered assistance and asked for assistance, I wanted to have approval first.
But then you're asking this body to approve something that's not even a possibility as of yet, correct?
Well, after I got approval, we have everything in place. If Remo is to say, yes, you're approved, I have trained medics at this point in time. I have all of our drugs sitting in the fridge. I have everything. All I have to do is put them on the ambulances and tell my crews, look, we are operational.
Just a procedural question here.
Yes, sir.
Actually, I think it's to Dr. McEwen, probably Dr. Bailey, just for some background. Well, what's the actual function of us at this point with this presentation? Last I remembered, it was to approve a set training program.
Yeah, before we were still approving regional agencies to go with RSI.
Okay.
If anybody would like to review our training, I can provide it.
How many credentials and how many certified medics do you have?
At this point in time, we have 6 credentialed and 1 trained medic. And we are setting up to run another class. I'm trying to keep it at a 7-to-1 student-teacher ratio for questions and clarity. The smaller the classes, the better off we are.
These are people that have been through class that you've taught, or they're credentialed and
They
trained
have
at
went
other
through the
agencies?
class that Glenn Stevens has taught.
No, that's what I mean, but taught at your agency, not credentialed and trained at other agencies.
The only one that was credentialed and trained at another agency was Shane Dinkelacher, who works for Albany County. And I did approve him with Dr. Broderick's permission. Yeah.
And I also, so there's 2 of us that have done a number of RSI, so I think
I can't hear what you said.
He said he's done a lot of RSS.
Oh,
Good.
okay.
So
Would-
how many ambulance crews do you guys have on at any given time?
At any given time, there is between 7 and 9 ambulances on. The maximum RSI ambulances that we could have would be 8.
How could you do that?
Or pardon me, the maximum RSI ambulances on could be 4. I'm sorry, I misspoke myself.
And that would be
So
spread out over.
presently you have
That would be spread out Troy, Cohoes, and then Saratoga would have the capabilities. And at this point in time, I have not started with Glens Falls because that's Mountain Lakes.
So at present, you have enough equipment to stock how many of those?
At this point in time, I'm waiting for my final laryngoscope to come in, but right now, we can do 3. And the 4th set of equipment will be here within a week.
Which equipment?
The video laryngoscope,
Right, which brand? What did you buy?
DRE. It is very similar to the McGrath that the helicopters used. Glenn showed us those, and I did a bunch of research. And they have movable screens. They have 3 different size disposable blades, and they work extremely well. And the definition on these screens is excellent.
So, if you, correct me if I'm wrong, you're not gonna have a double medic crew in, say, Cohoes?
We will need to, Troy would need to go back up Cohoes if there was an RSI trained medic.
Right.
We are being extremely selective of the paramedics that are going through the course. We're not taking everybody in and saying, okay, you're getting RSI, period, end of story. We're being very selective, quality people that have been doing this for a while and that we have high confidence in.
Are you making video primary for all intubations, or only if they need it?
We are trying to make it primary for all intubations, and I am working on getting one video for each and every ambulance.
Well, I mean for the ones that you have it for RSI.
Yes,
At least
yes,
for those.
that
So
would
that's your
be
primary,
primary.
it's your primary device?
Correct,
For RSI.
yes. Absolutely. Everybody that has used those to date absolutely loves them and says that they're phenomenal pieces of equipment.
I guess the only thing I have a little bit of concern about is the number that you have trained presently for the amount of ambulances that you have and the amount of territory. Is there gonna be enough trained people to make sure that there are 2 medics?
It is
24/7
going
that
to
can do
be,
this?
in the beginning, it's gonna be tight. I have another class that is going to be scheduled, which is gonna bring us up to 14 medics. And as things go on, our trained and credentialed medics will be growing. And as we go to other agencies, and then we'll have other team members or other approved agencies that will be willing to help us, and we'd also be willing to help them as needed. Yes, sir.
How are you moving your trained medic to a credentialed medic? What's your parameter for assessment?
Parameter for that is right now taking a little while. There's going to be at least a year working as a trained medic, attending 2 of the update classes, which are going to be at least 4 hours every 6 months, and a complete review of any RSIs that they assist in to make sure that there's no errors. Our credentialed medics will also be, hey, what's our dosage of this etomidate? What's our dosage of the ketamine? And running them through extra training. So everything is going to be based on training, based on experience.
But do you have a minimum number of live intubations with RSI before you go?
I am shooting for 5 once my other training people get back to me on that, but I want to see 5 intubations successfully completed. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry.
How many intubations annually does your agency do?
At this point in time, I want to say we're between 20 and 30 annual intubations. I do not have a number for potential RSI intubations. Those are those are full arrests that I'm referring to. Yes, sir.
You guys are on paper documentation still, correct?
Yes, that will be changing. I don't have an exact date yet. We do have the iPads, but we have not implemented the IPCR as of yet.
And no time frame on that either?
I do not have the time frame. I'm actually not involved with that aspect of Empire at this point in time.
So until that point, how are they making their documentation?
Documentation is all being done with paper PCR, sir.
Is it standardized though for their documentation of the actual procedure?
Oh, yes, yes, that would all be documented as far as step by step and extremely detailed, all the way to securing the device with a commercial securing agent, device, and periodically checking tube placement, keeping the end tidal CO2 between 34 or 35 to 45, et cetera, et cetera.
Any other questions? Do you think we have a motion to approve or disapprove?
I may have actually missed out. Have we, has anybody actually looked at any of the education plan or the?
It's just, actually, it's true, it's just been presented now, so we can't even approve it. What I would do is if you can, do you want to table this to the next? If you can give Tim a copy of all the materials, it would be best if you could send the file so we can send it out to all of us.
Okay.
So that we
Yes,
can
I have,
just,
I
look
brought
at it
everything with
and
me,
review it.
so I can make copies of that, and I can make sure Tim gets it all.
Yeah, so that way we can look at it and actually have some time to digest it.
Unfortunately, it's just hard to make a decision,
Yeah,
with
you-
verbal presentation without seeing documents in front of us.
See what a motion to,
I'd like to make a motion to table this in lieu of getting time to review written documentation.
okay. Second,
Understood, I'll get that stuff.
this week, some time to read through it.
No problem.
So, Peter, can you come on up and do your Loxo presentation? You're our last guest out of here. So while he's setting that up, there was a Remac subcommittee that formed to research the signal pricing. We already went through the stroke guidelines.
What is that, Rob?
That is,
Signal pricing.
when you call, when you're the medic in the field, you run an ALS call that involves some sort of, I think, treatment and not just some sort of invasive procedure. You get the number from Remo, and then the agency gets billed for those numbers, which then funds part of the funding for the agency.
I'm sorry, I just got a text. Every Albany hospital is on version. There's no beds at St. Peter's or
Memorial and Underground.
Memorial is also on version. Maybe you guys should go to work. Start pumping those patients out.
Isn't it a 3 strikes you're out and you're off diversion already?
You guys, the turnaround time is very long.
All the memorials are wide open, okay? All
Ellis, here we go, Ellis.
Alice doesn't go on diversion,
We're full
do
on
you?
holds already.
That's just missing.
This is Monday, but it's Wednesday.
Americans, only place that's open.
Not for long.
Wait 10 minutes.
I was gonna say give it 10 minutes.
Okay, so this is where the agency pays Remo.
Yes.
I got you.
Yeah, but they haven't updated the pricing in a
Yeah,
while,
I
so.
got you, okay.
All right, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Peter Brody. I'm the EMS Data Coordinator for the state of New York. I was hired a year ago, or a little more than a year ago, on the Prescription Drug Overdose Program grant through the CDC. The Public Health Information Group had asked Lee Burns for some data on naloxone administration, and she said, if you want data, you have to give me a body, so that's where I got my job. what I do there at the state is I do reporting on data. I receive the data, identify quality gaps, and I work with the regions, I work with the agencies to identify those gaps and challenges, and then we also work with the EPCR platforms to correct those gaps that they have, the quality gaps. Some of our EPCR platforms are very effective at adapting to their situations at hand, and some of them are not. So as we make the transition to NEMSIS 3.4.0, which is slated to start in a little less than 2 months, we have taken steps to improve the quality, but I can talk about that probably over the summer or in the fall if you'd like, once we successfully do the implementation. Working with Tim Mirabile and Dean Romano, they were looking for some data. This is a report that was run and was emailed this morning around 10 a.m. The report runs based on data submitted from the day prior. So one of the things that the county public health directors have been looking for is where are we administering naloxone? The challenge that we have in this particular data is not that it was performed, but that it was documented on the early ones we're capturing are the ones that are coming through shortly after the call is completed. So we have agencies who submit data monthly, and their data is not captured in these reports unless they happen to submit a call from the day previous in their monthly submission, which almost never happens. In NEMSIS 3.4, the requirement is that the data is transmitted to the state and the PCR to the hospital as close to real time as possible. So platforms like ESO, EMS charts, they already do that on a regular, and the Image Trend do that on a regular basis. Platforms like Zoll don't necessarily do that, but they are primed to do that in NEMSIS 3.4. Zoll is aware of it, as are their agencies who are using it. So this data is what comes through every night. This is sent by email. It is HIPAA compliant. We did a little background work to make sure that it was. See that the incident date, I believe today is 4th. The incident date was yesterday. The incident number, the region, the county, and that's the incident county, not the agency county, the service who provided it, where the person was found, where the patient was encountered, and provide some information across the top. What I did earlier today was to run a data summary on, that wasn't mine, so I was kind of hoping it belonged to you.
That one is mine.
All right, so what I did is I ran the data summary for 2016 and 2017 and put them on the same spreadsheet. And in this region, there were 1,423 doses of Narcan administered as documented in 2017. So all the data from 2017 has been received by now. Great follow-up work by Hudson Mohawk Remsco to make that happen. There's some information. One of the things you'll take note of here in this is that there are some interesting numbers, and I find this when I do the statewide report as well, because some people are getting 5 milligrams of naloxone all at once, and I won't show the name of these agencies, so I don't embarrass anyone. But there are 67 out of those 423 administrations that have no doses. So you gave Narcan and you didn't record how much it was. It's not limited to this. When we did a collaborative protocol study that Dr. Daly, oh good Lord God, Fulliger, I did remember his name, and Travis Howe from Mountain Lakes requested, we found there were some interesting misunderstandings of how to document across the state. The difference between a chest compression and a chest decompression. From a BLS crew that assumed, it had compression in it, so they must be doing CPR. Well, you're doing CPR, you're documenting you're poking a hole in his chest. So that crew was counseled by their REMSCO, And in some of these cases, oops,
Peter, excuse me, these are all Narcans that are administered by EMS crews, right? Not administered prior to arrival by either lay people or law enforcement?
that's correct.
Okay.
Trained professionals.
And in some cases, naloxone was given as milliliters per hour. Here, they were given 5 milliliters per hour, which I found entertaining. Because, I went looking for research to find out how that actually happens. There were other delivery routes because they couldn't find intranasal in their documentation system. That happened twice. They got 4 milligrams all at once. That must be the new method. And
Well, that's the intranasal one. From one of the public health docs out west, when we ran out of atomizers, right?
yep,
That if you're given PR, and I'm sure PR doesn't appear in the.
yeah. Neither does sublingual as a method for delivering it.
I think in the EMS charts, I'm pretty sure rectal is an option. It doesn't say PR, it says rectal.
Actually, rectal is an option.
Yeah.
Because you can get, was it diastat?
Yeah.
How many?
Not in this region. And then we had some where they said they gave 2, but they didn't tell you whether it's milligrams, milliliters, or what that they were given. So some of it is dependent on the documentation that's received. And again, I'm hiding the names of the agencies, so we're not embarrassing anyone here.
Providing feedback to the agencies specifically on where their compliance was and how they measured up as far as the...
That's a step down. That once I get into NEMSIS 3.4, then we're going to do that.
Awesome.
We've been waiting for 3.4 for 3.5 years now. My objective is to get it done.
We've been here 2 hours.
Yeah.
That's a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that motion. I don't have a vote, but that's okay. All right, and here we have, there are 3 responses to most activities out in the field. You either improve, you get worse, or you stay the same. Here, it was, there were a lot of not recorded, so there was a not known. Maybe they weren't there after they gave the drug. They got hijacked and kidnapped and went on a trip. Or it was simply left blank. These issues, this is a little preview of NEMSIS 3.4, will not happen in NEMSIS 3.4. If your documentation is incomplete, your file will be rejected by the platform. So EMS charts will reject your chart if it's not correct. Same with ZOL and same with ESL. The New York State rules have been written as failures. Not as, oh, here we're going to slap you on the hand and take a point off because you were too lazy to check the right box. Where we will find the problems are when they give the naloxone sublingually. Naloxone alphabetically is immediately before nitroglycerin. There's a hospital in New York City that has a 911 system that's been giving naloxone sublingually for chest pain. Some of the patients improved. We have some providers out in the western part of the state that gave naloxone intraocular. I cringed when I heard that. And there were some that give it into the ear. Intraotic. I actually had to look that one up. So.
They have to have tubes.
Yes. So this is the data that I can put together for them. It's helping identify where overdoses are happening. There is significant interest from law enforcement in obtaining this data, but that's for a different purpose. They are in communication with us. However, we are required to be compliant with Article 30. As far as our data, that guides a lot of what we do. So they haven't been successful in obtaining our data to this point. To answer Gio's question, yes, we'll be doing more of that once we make the transition to 3.4. But right now, Tim and his staff are receiving this. I know Schenectady County has a listserv that they shared this information on, so that they're seeing where the information, where the administrations of naloxone are being delivered. If you look down here on this particular day, this is the same patient, because it's the same encounter. I went through and highlighted these. Well, hopefully I don't show anything bad about Gilliland. They gave it intravenously, 1 milligram. They didn't record whether he approved, but he was treated and transported by EMS. So every dose is shown here. Dr. Daly had a request for, oh Lord help me, when you sent me that report, I looked at it and I'm like, you must be kidding. because getting the data out would require me to use SAS, and I do not use SAS. I give it to you, but I don't use the program. We will be able to, we do have researchers down in Public Health Information Group who can pull that information out for us. Right now, they're trying to streamline a quarterly report that goes out to public health officials that talks about how many doses of naloxone, how many admissions to OASIS facilities come from residents of their county, how many doses of naloxone are given within their county, and that report becomes a little bit of a challenge. And I'll use a county not in this region when they had a tiered system. And in that tiered system, one agency's EPCR program recorded all of their hours 1 hour off from what the call actually was. So you'd have the fire department arriving at 10 a.m. and the ambulance arriving at 11 a.m. when they were actually arriving at the same time. But their systems converted all the time to East to Central time. So trying to identify all of those when they're coming from 2 different documentation systems at the same time also became a bit of a challenge. So, huh?
How much more do you have?
I'm almost done.
Okay.
Trust me, I've been waiting 3 hours, so I'm ready to go home. But this is a tool that we're able to work with Tim and his staff to be able to provide this information. If there's more data that you're looking for, we can just let Tim know and we can work to put that into the report as well. So then we're able to look at where things are being delivered and where the medication is being delivered and what the outcomes are and where some potential training might need to be or where we need to dedicate more resources. I've been making, I made 2 trips through the North Country, which for anybody from the stroke discussion is curious, they don't have a stroke center at all in North Country, Remsco, and through Mountain Lakes to talk about the importance of quality documentation. I'll be doing that in Hudson Valley, Westchester, and New York City as well. And if there's a interest, we can do that as a combined effort here with ARAMS. So, and I'm more than happy to sit in my little car and drive all over. Here it's a whole lot easier, it's a day trip. So, are there any questions on this?
Is this available at like a heat chart, a daily heat chart instead of a daily list?
I beg your pardon?
A daily, like a heat map?
No. Not in image trend. But if you want this in Excel format, I can flip your report to send it to you in Excel, and then you can do with it what you want.
I won't be able to put out an app from Excel either, so.
Okay.
I just was wondering if Image Trend would generate a map.
No.
to you.
No, Image Trend has a product that we don't, that the state of New York does not have. It's called Continuum. Continuum is a little expensive to set up, and then I think it's about 10 grand a year to maintain, but it provides some information. Law enforcement uses it for certain things. EMS uses it. Identifies intense spaces, but it's a little bit of a setup, and if you ever try to buy anything at the state of New York, are there still state employees here? If you ever try to buy anything at the state of New York, it's an 18-month process, and by the time you go to buy it, it's changed. So, are there any questions? Any other questions? Sorry.
Peter, I appreciate you coming and doing this. It's fascinating to see what we have as both the amount of work that you have to do in order to make it into accessible data. And I really appreciate you making the trips around the state to get people closer. This is where the academic community was talking earlier about documentation standards and how it then ultimately impacts something like this. It's really key. So everybody here knows, I'm watching the naloxone administrations through EMS charts on a daily basis. Over the course of the last 6 months, there's only been a couple of times where there've been more than 2 administrations of naloxone in a single agency within a single 24-hour period. When those have occurred, I then called and checked with the agency and find out if there was anything else pertinent to that. The most recent one with 2, they were in just very disparate locations within the same city.
Well, that doesn't mean they didn't have the same dealer.
Exactly. Ultimately, it would be good if we could come up with a good link to public health. The pieces of all of that are still way out there. As Scott had mentioned last time, OD Map is a fantastic tool.
OD Map is running into some challenges now.
What?
ODMAP is running into some challenges,
A lot of challenges.
especially in the law enforcement community.
And there is a custom form of ODMAP they're using out west that seems to be some success. But how to get all of this data together to be able to allow some of the public health entities to better work on this, we probably won't figure out until we've moved on to the next drug.
Right. I know one of the things that the Public Health Information Group is interested in is how much naloxone is being administered by for each encounter. You know, what is the therapeutic threshold? The challenge with that is, especially in this area, if law enforcement administers the first dose, BLSFR, documenting on paper, administers the second dose, EMS is only documenting what skills they provide and perform. Again, another issue we found when we did the quality review for the collaborative protocol for the airway management. So we're not actually getting the full picture. Our EPCR data is updated within 10 to 15 days of the end of every month for those who submit monthly. However, those participating in the cooperating agent or the COOP program, their data doesn't necessarily come through for 5 to 6 months. And people are challenging OD mapping as identifying private residences in more urban areas.
I think they were making a change in version 2 of that.
Yeah, they're working on it. We have a rep from New York, New Jersey, Haida, who serves with us in the Public Health Information Group, and she works with us on that. Thank you.
Daily had to do say partisan. That's basically it. So let's talk about anything else.
So I've been tapped to just kind of close out the meeting here. Dr. McHugh has a meeting with his meeting in regards to his other hat at Ellis here in the next little bit and has to go. My understanding is our only other talking point was, I believe, from Dr. Daly regarding diltiazem. Diltiazem.
Don't use it.
Ain't none. Ain't none, ain't coming back anytime soon. It's from our pharmacist.
Ain't coming anytime soon.
We want to substitute another calcium channel blocker.
Rapid fit. Bring it back. We got Liam dead, I mean, what's old is new.
I don't know, do you have any suggestions that can be rapidly implemented and?
Rapidol is the only other, that classic calcium channel blockers, so. You know, either diltiazem or verapamil. If you can't have diltiazem, you get verapamil.
So do we want to add that as a substitute?
So are we,
Electricity is never backward.
electricity is never backward. We won't list that as a formal motion.
No.
Does anybody have any additional talking points on changing to verapamil or making a formal statement?
Are we in crisis mode with diltiazem at this point? I mean, have you been hearing from EMS agencies that they don't have any, or just that we know that it's going to be an issue at some point?
We know it's going to be an issue at some point for EMS agencies because the hospitals don't have it anymore.
Yeah.
But EMS agencies don't use it with great enough frequency
Right.
for it to become a crisis yet. But that's probably because substocks, which don't get turned over that fast, are relatively small. It would be unusual if it was the first time we ever have hospitals calling an EMS agency and asking to bring the drug by. But I think it's just something for us to keep on our radar. I would make the firm recommendation not for us to start carrying.
So the only thing I'll suggest is, we do go through it, most agencies, not at Valatia, but at most agencies, they do go through it pretty quick because they're replacing it every 30 days because they're not refrigerating it. So they do go through their substock pretty quickly. B, I don't know, maybe you can speak to this, is the Lyoject stuff still, I think that was what that product was called, the packaging. We used to be able to buy it originally in a package that was, we used to screw it together and it would reconstitute. Yeah, was that, is that still available? Is that still on the market? And,
I'm not sure.
okay.
The
Just,
last time we looked for it, it was not on the market.
it may just be ridiculously expensive even if it's available, but, just a thought.
Yeah.
And maybe a different concentration than what
That
we,
says it's available.
yeah.
That says it's available.
I always thought in the long run that had to be cheaper than throwing away vial after vial every month. We have refrigerators in our vehicles and we don't throw ours away anyway, but just a thought.
All right, so at this point, we'll just hold it.
We'll make that an informational point only, to be tracked.
But it may be worth a communication to the EMS agencies to let them know that it's not available, and if it looks like you're gonna run out soon, get an order in, so that at least you're on the back order list now. Just a thought. Is it worth Tim sending out a message to all the ALS agencies to say,
Well, we'll come out as a Remac advisory.
yeah,
No, we can do this. Good idea.
I'm asking, that's-
Good idea, but so we not do it.
Going back, there was the cardiologist versus the emergency physician. The emergency physician always ordering doshiazine, the cardiologist always ordering metoprolol. Is there any big comparisons to verapamil versus metoprolol?
Interesting question, I would have to look at research, I don't know.
I'm trying to think of it as an alternative. I mean, with verapamil, if that's the only thing that's available, the question is it better or worse than metoprolol for a pre-hospital patient?
I guess your only concern is you have somebody with significant reactive airway disease, perhaps metoprolol would be a better choice.
We still have amiodarone, but that's both.
just according to the Boundtree website, they have the 50 milligram vial is available, and the others are all not. So, just a thought, maybe advising agencies that maybe they can buy a different size that we normally don't buy, giving them the authority to do that, because that's not in the formulary as our normal size.
That's a good idea, Scott.
It's the same concentration, it's 50 and 10 instead of 25 and 5.
So I'm no parliamentarian, does this require a motion and vote? Or can we just say it? Good. Unless I missed it, I don't believe that we got any additional updates from the pre-notification work group. Is that correct?
I have just a question, under new business, the formation of the group to talk about signal pricing, did we do that?
Well, I heard some discussion about signal pricing at one point. Was there any further discussion that needs to be had?
What did we decide in a group that's gonna figure out that signal pricing? Was there a group established?
What's the reason for it?
Say again, sorry?
What's the reason for it?
I
The reason was to discuss the pricing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the only reason to discuss the pricing is for it to go up. My guess is, what's the reason for it?
Right.
Okay, we can hold.
Maybe we decide if there's a genuine need or if it's just on the wish list to toss in the bucket.
Is that a wish list for you or what?
I don't recall specific discussions as to why that was added, and like I said, was notified that I'd be up here 30 seconds before you all saw me walk up here, so I'm at a bit of a loss on the history of that one. Tim, was there
It's a
something?
perennial discussion item, it comes up every year, every couple of years, whether or not it needs to be revisited, whether or not it's useful, whether or not it should go up, whether or not it should go down. Doc Daly and I went to Saratoga County at least once, maybe twice, because they had concerns relative to that pricing structure too. So I think this was thrown out there to get a committee together and actually poll the regions, poll the agencies and stuff, and find out, what they want to do with it. It goes to a lot of stuff here at Remo and stuff, but I think what we want is agency input relative to, do we need to change it? Does it need to be examined any further or not?
I may be completely wrong, but I think the last time we talked about this seriously in this group, we decided that the definition of what the signal consisted of was here, and we finally nailed that one down, I think. but the business decision of cost, plan, what it was used for, et cetera, was a Remsco issue and not a Remac issue.
I agree. That sounds good.
I mean, ultimately, it's a budget thing, right? The money that we bring in from
I
that.
make a motion that we
is-
never bring this issue up again. And all future discussions be by the Remsco. Any seconds on that?
Second.
All right.
If that's a formal,
Sounded
motion
formal.
and second, we take a vote.
Cross that item off.
Those in favor? Those not in favor? Motion passes. Fair enough. All right.
You did that very well.
I try. All right, so now moving on, pre-notification work group updates.
Met yesterday, by go-to meeting, it was really pretty effective, at putting down some ideas of what folks were looking for. It was, people from the hospital, both ED nursing as well as, stroke and STEMI coordinators, some ED physicians, some providers. And I think we put together some concepts behind what a pre-notification system would be, and are starting to collect more information.
Is there any type of plan moving forward on how we're going to separate the products that are appropriate for us versus not?
It looks at this point like there are probably 3 products, maybe 4. Once we have formal recommendations or formal concepts of what each of them are, the hard discussion we're all going to have is where the money for one of these products is going to come from, and then figuring out the best pathway for that money. Once we have that, hopefully we'll be able to, the person or the folks who will benefit the most will be people with deep pockets, and we can start figuring out whether or not we can come up with a business plan for it.
Anything additional? No? All right, moving on, confirmation of Remac hospital alternates. I don't actually know what that means.
Maybe you should table that.
Can we table that for the next meeting?
Sounds like a plan.
We'll make that decision by consensus. Excellent. The last is a reminder, annual agency RSI reports to be presented 6/6/18 at the Remac meeting. That was informational only. Any additional items from the floor? Do we have a motion to adjourn? Do we have a second? In favor? Opposed? Make it so. Thank you, guys.
It's not opposed, it's not in favor. Not in favor, you said before. In favor and then not in favor.
Fair enough.
Very good, well done.
So, well, we've talked twice now, 2 weeks, so about, first about the, you have a terrible memory, because you like stare.
No, I'm just very tired from sitting there.
That's okay, that's okay.
That's
Okay, so, initially was the EMT certification database thing, so I'll cover that conversation.
Right.
Okay, so
I have
then you called me the other day about.